Adrian opened his eyes. The air was thick, saturated with warmth and silence. Dampness clung to the cracked wooden floor, and droplets slid slowly down fogged windows, falling with soft, deliberate taps. The room was dimly lit, its walls faded to a lifeless orange, like a memory losing color. The air smelled of mildew and thyme, laced with a faint antiseptic sting that clung to the back of the throat. It was very warm, almost oppressively so, and the humidity made every breath feel heavy. An empty plastic glass lay on its side near the corner, forgotten. And though he didn't recognize the place consciously, something inside him did. A brittle page lay on the floor, torn from a book, maybe an old medical manual. The ink was smudged where water had touched it. His chest tightened. It wasn't fear, it was memory, buried, distorted, familiar in feeling but not in detail. He pressed his palms together, rubbing them hard, not for warmth but to tether himself to sensation. This place, it was not neutral, it judged. He moved through the room slowly, eyes scanning for an exit. None, only walls that felt like they were listening. He clenched his jaw, trying to push down the nausea rising from his gut. Then a being appeared. Adrian turned sharply, breath catching. His heart didn't just beat faster, it recoiled. Not out of fear, but anticipation. He had grown too used to truths arriving cloaked in pain. The being stepped forward, solemn and deliberate. "Adrian," it said, voice layered like an echo over still water. "I have come to share the truth with you. Not to convince, not to command, but to offer you the tools of understanding, so that your choice may be fully your own." Adrian didn't respond at first. His hands trembled. He looked the being in the eyes. "You've already told me about the Elysium. I've already seen too much. What decision could possibly remain?" The being's expression did not shift. It only softened. "At this juncture," it said, "you are called to choose. Not simply between Numens and Laptus, but between what you believe ought to be preserved, and what deserves to be." Adrian closed his eyes briefly. He felt it then. The pull of compassion, the ache of doubt, the burden of understanding. He wasn't a strategist like Dane. He wasn't a force like Sebastian. He was the one who felt things too deeply, who remembered every face from the war, not as statistics but as lives. "How can a god," the being continued, "whose essence should be to protect life, choose to activate a process that begins with the extermination of intelligent civilizations? Not just the Ishtoas, Kopats or Kotes, but every sentient being across their worlds, and all life surrounding them. That was Numens's choice." Adrian's throat tightened. He blinked once, too slowly, as if trying to clear not his vision, but the weight of what he had just heard. "I don't understand," he whispered. "He was supposed to stand for us." "That is the question," the being said gently. "Is it righteous to fight for one who has chosen to survive by sacrificing others' lives? Can any god be justified in that?" The words struck deeply, not because they were cruel, but because they were fair. Adrian had always believed in empathy, in second chances, in fighting for the better part of someone, even when that someone was flawed. But this wasn't about imperfection. This was about consequence. Still, the thought of abandoning Numens made him feel sick. The being didn't press. Instead, it offered him the dignity of silence. After a while, it spoke again, calmly, without judgment. "The Elysium is not a casual invocation. It is the final option when all other hopes have failed. That is why, until now, it had never been used. And still, Numens chose it. He asked for it. Not because he had no other choice, but because he feared the end." Adrian looked down at his hands. His thoughts were a blur. He couldn't make sense of any of it. But for the first time, he allowed himself to admit, maybe love and loyalty weren't the same thing. Adrian stared at the being, his breath deepening, his chest rising and falling with uneven rhythm. A pulse of heat climbed up his neck, but he forced himself to remain still, to listen, even as the words unsettled him. The being's voice remained even, unflinching. "Laptus harbored aspirations for the planets of your Fraser that diverged significantly from Numens's doctrine, and like all ambitions, Their merit is open to interpretation. Those raised under Numans's light may view Laptus as a heretic. But I ask you, does any belief system, no matter how sacred, justify the annihilation of billions? Because that is what Numans chose. Adrian blinked slowly. His lips parted, but he couldn't find the words at first. The weight of the implication struck him like a tidal force. "You mean," he said finally, voice hoarse, "the Ishtoas and the Kopats, they're gone?" The being nodded solemnly. "Yes, wiped out. Entire civilizations extinguished. Their histories, their art, their families, gone. Numans made that decision when he invoked the Eligium, and no divine act can undo it. Rebuilding life on those planets will take millions of years, an undertaking that only a god can lead. Whether that god is Numans or Laptus, that is the question now placed in your hands." Adrian turned away. His gaze drifted to the condensation on the wall, watching a single droplet slide downward, cutting through dust as it moved. "How can I choose between two beings I barely understand?" he asked. "I know what Numans did. I felt the cost of it. But what about Laptus? What has he done? What does he want?" The being stepped closer, his tone softening. "I am a follower of Laptus, yes," it admitted. "Not blindly, but because I believe in the clarity of his design. Where Numans embraced pain as a path to enlightenment, anguish, longing, hunger, inequality, Laptus sought balance through transformation. Change, even if jarring, even if imperfect. He does not demand suffering as a precondition for growth." Adrian remained silent, his brows knit. He didn't fully agree. He didn't fully disagree either. There was truth in both doctrines, and danger. The being continued. "Numans calls it resilience. Laptus calls it cruelty. You have seen both sides now, but your perspective is unique. You question, you feel. You do not follow blindly like your companions, whose pride has blurred their vision. You can help them see there is more than one truth. That choosing to protect a god who sacrifices life for his own sake may not be an act of loyalty, but of submission." Still, Adrian didn't answer. His eyes lowered to the floor again, scanning the patterns of rot in the wood, the water stains around the corners. Several memories of pain and sorrow flooded his mind, each sharper than the last. Waves of anguish surged through him, fragments of extreme suffering rising like echoes from the deepest corners of his past. He looked up, and there, in his eyes, was something solid. A decision, not final, not absolute, but present. "I want to see," he said quietly. "I want to see what a world under Laptus would look like. Not because I trust him, not yet, but because I need to understand before I choose." The being inclined his head. "That is wisdom, Adrian. Not certainty, but clarity of intent. You now hold the thread that can reshape the future. If you give it to Laptus, your world will shift, and it will be you, not a god, who initiated that change." Adrian hesitated. Then, slowly he said, "If I do this, it's not for revenge. It's not because I've stopped believing in Numans. It's because belief without truth is just a beautiful lie." The being's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then show them. Help them see that even gods must answer to the lives they claim to protect." Adrian nodded once, reluctantly, resolutely. He was not at peace, but he was no longer uncertain. That page on the floor, it once held instructions, healing. And now, all it did was fade.